On This Week in Enterprise Tech, we talk about cord cutting while people are just watching fewer channels. And Curt talks about how organizations are moving forward with deploying containers, but not really considering security. Plus, Brian Curtis and I talk with Vijay Kurkal, Chief Operating Officer at Resolve Systems, about IT automation and how it's not just for DevOps. It's Wyatt in the set.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
This is Twit. This Week in Enterprise Tech, episode 353, recorded August 2nd, 2019. Automation, it's not just for DevOps. This episode of This Week in Enterprise Tech is brought to you by Wasabi Hot Cloud Storage. Thinking about moving your data storage to the cloud? Wasabi is enterprise-class cloud storage at 1/5 the price of Amazon and up to 6 times faster with no hidden fees for egress or API requests. Calculate your savings and try Wasabi with free unlimited storage for a month at wasabi.com, code ENTERPRISE. And by NetScout. Meeting the digital demands of today starts with a bold new IT strategy. NetScout is delivering a new perspective, visibility without borders. To guide your digital success and data center transformation, get seamless visibility and monitoring for performance and security. See how at netscout.com. Welcome to Twit, This Week in Enterprise Tech, the show that is dedicated to you, the enterprise professional, the IT pro, and that geek who just wants to know how this world is connected. I'm your host, Louis Maresca, your guide to this big world of the enterprise, but I definitely can't guide you by myself. Let's bring in the experts, starting with our very own geek in paradise, Mr. Brian Chee, Director, Advanced Network Computing Laboratory in Honolulu. Cheebert, what's keeping you busy down there in paradise?
I'm actually having a whole bunch of fun with a device called a WIO, W-I-O. It's from Seed Studios, S-E-E-E-D. And the cool thing is it's a teeny tiny, really, really, really cheap computing device. And I'm using Node-RED, which is a Java-based system. And I'm harvesting the data, including event-driven data, using WebSockets, and able to push that out to email, to CSV files, to MySQL files, and so forth. And it's drag and drop. So non-programmers can actually have a chance at maintaining this after I retire.
Fantastic. You guys all work on all the cool stuff. Very cool, very cool. Well, speaking of experts, we also have our very own Mr. Curtis Franklin, Senior Editor at Dark Reading. Curtis, how is it going down there in the Sunshine State?
Well, today it's not terribly sunshiny. We've already had a couple inches of rain, and it looks like we could get a couple more inches. So we're not living up to our marketing billing, but that makes it a perfect time to be inside talking to the Twilight Riot and to be packing to get ready to head out to Black Hat and DEF CON. That happens next week, and boy, is my dance card full, and that's even before I have to deal with the grasshopper apocalypse that has hit Las Vegas.
I mean, I was going to say, you usually schedule things to the second, so you're usually busy for every second of every second that you were there, basically, right?
It is a full dance card. I will go from about 8 o'clock in the morning until at least 10 o'clock at night. Trying to leave myself just enough room to, take bio breaks and keep a few words coming out so that people don't forget that I'm alive while I'm out there.
Fantastic. Well, we're looking forward to that coverage for sure. Well, folks, we do have a really great schedule for us today in the show, too. We're not only talking about cord cutting and why people are watching fewer channels, but we also talk about how organizations are racing ahead into container deployment, but it can actually be hurting security. But we also have a great guest, Vijay Kurkal from Resolve Systems, to talk about IT automation. But before we do, let's go ahead and jump into this week's Blips. Now, since the beginning of time, there have been conspiracy theorists, and methods of spreading the word have not always been easy, but methods for conspiracy theories, it's some kind or another. There's always been some way of communicating across. But in this day and age, being in the always online era, it's actually accelerated its growth and broadened its spread. Is this a big concern? Well, the FBI thinks so. In fact, they believe that the modern conspiracy theories will drive future threats from domestic extremists. Now, the FBI has spent some cycles thinking about this. In fact, they've put out a new internal manifesto about it. And in it, it describes the likelihood that we see more theories emerge, spread, and evolve in the modern information marketplace over the near term. Now, the new range of these theories will foster anti-government sentiment, promoting radical and religious prejudice, increasing political tensions, and occasionally driving both groups and individuals to commit criminal or violent acts. Now, how likely, you may ask, this will happen? The FBI describes a probability of 80% of something like this occurring in the future. Now, sounds more hypothetical than anything, but the memo explicitly cites some specific circumstances. In fact, they call out Pizzagate and QAnon as examples of modern fringe political conspiracy theories that have already been implicated in violence. Now, the Pizzagate theory came to head in 2016 when it actually a devotee marched into D.C. pizzeria with an AR-15 and started making threats. Now, the theory claimed falsely that a high-ranking Democratic official was operating a child ring out of the basement of the pizza shop, which received hundreds of threats. Now, the shooter took it upon himself to actually self-investigate and was ultimately sentenced to 4 years in prison on weapons and assault charges. Now, the assault on the pizzeria did not stop conspiracy theorists. Now, QAnon, also another example, but it's a lot more complicated. In fact, it's about an anonymous insider known as Q is consistently dripping out insider information about Donald Trump's Byzantine long-term plans to take down the deep state. Now, the interesting part here is that the FBI is actually warning the people in the future that there is really no plans to fix this problem. There's no solution, no action items for them, but they're just kind of warning it. Now, with additions of new startups and tooling in this area to disambiguate the conspiracy from the fact could help, but only the future will tell.
Well, a nation state is targeting U.S. utilities with a very specific spear phishing attack. A new phishing attack is hitting U.S. utilities with threats that their engineers could be in danger of losing their professional licenses. But in reality, the only danger comes from panicked employees clicking on the embedded Word document and infecting their computers with a remote access Trojan and command and control proxy that could allow the attacker to both spy on and control the infected machines. Researchers at Proofpoint found that the look-back malware, as they've dubbed it, and many of the macros used in the campaign look very similar to tools used in a 2018 campaign launched against Japanese businesses. While the researchers note it's possible techniques are being used to mislead those trying to define attribution for the attack, a nation-state actor is almost certainly the attacker. Now, while Proofpoint hasn't identified the nation-state involved, FireEye's researchers said in 2018 that the group targeting those Japanese media entities was APT-10. That's a Chinese cyber espionage group that FireEye has tracked since 2009 and that has a history of targeting Japanese and U.S. entities.
It's official. The U.S. government has approved the T-Mobile and Sprint merger. The Justice Department today announced its approval of the T-Mobile-Sprint merger as part of a settlement that requires the merging companies to spin off several assets to Dish Network. The DOJ decided against filing a lawsuit to block the T-Mobile U.S. purchase of Sprint, even though it reduces the number of major mobile network providers from 4 to 3. In exchange for its approval, the DOJ convinced the companies to sell Dish Spectrum licenses, wholesale network access, and Sprint's prepaid business, including subsidiaries Boost Mobile and Virgin Mobile. Boost and Virgin both resell Sprint network access instead of operating their own networks. So while this may look on the surface as only really affecting the consumer, this merger has some fairly big ramifications for the enterprise in that this gives T-Mobile access to some fairly nice frequency ranges from Sprint that, oh, by the way, they got from the Clearwire acquisition, and gives T-Mobile a really big boost for the M2M applications, an area that AT&T has previously ruled.
Now, the Pentagon has some massive computing needs because they need to have some serious plans to scale out their coverage. Well, in order to achieve that level of scale, they need a cloud provider to do so. Now, over the past months, they've seemed to narrow their search down on where they were going, what cloud provider they were going to use. But however, it seems they put a pause on their search. Now, this is actually just weeks before a winner of that contract was going to be announced. Now, what's the actual deal here worth? Well, just a measly $10 billion over the next 10 years. Now, the project, dubbed JEDI, or Joint Enterprise Defense Infrastructure, is a high-profile contract to collect and store sensitive military data and give U.S. warfighters access to cutting-edge technologies like artificial intelligence. Now, the pause on the decision was actually under more examination, and it's actually good news for providers like Oracle and IBM, which have been knocked out of the bidding competition and unsuccessfully sued to block the award. Now, they and some other Republicans in Congress have argued that the Defense Department should select multiple companies instead of a single winner. Now, critics have also accused the Pentagon and Amazon of having an unfairly cozy relationship. Now, critics have pointed to several Defense Department employees who have done work for Amazon's cloud business, AWS. Now, all of these items are feeding into the decision to put a hold on the contract before more data is considered. Now, it's actually not unlikely that this could be due to the unsatisfaction with Jeff Bezos and Trump's relationship as well, but that could be something else. Now, if cloud providers want to scale, this is definitely a time to spike interest for the Pentagon to gain this kind of game-changing contract in the near future.
Well, Cisco is paying $8.6 million in the first false claim suit for vulnerabilities in security products. Cisco Systems has agreed on July 31st to pay $8.6 million to settle litigation that the enterprise technology giant violated the U.S. False Claims Act for years when it failed to patch vulnerabilities in its family of video surveillance products while continuing to sell the devices and software to the U.S. government. The lawsuit originates from issues in Cisco's video surveillance manager that were reported in 2009 by a security consultant, James Glenn, who was working for a Cisco partner. The lawsuit maintains that after initially listening to Glenn, the company fired him and continued selling the product. Now, because the vulnerable product exposed government agencies to greater cyber risk, the lawyers brought the whistleblower suit under the U.S. False Claims Act in federal court in the Western District of New York. Under the settlement, which, by the way, is not a court ruling, Cisco agrees to partially refund the government. The $8.6 million penalty includes 20% paid to Glenn for his role in reporting the issue to the government. For security companies, the settlement should be seen as a warning that they could be held liable for vulnerabilities in their products if those issues aren't handled in a timely manner.
So I saw this article not too long ago, and I thought, oh, man, talk about timely. Because Curt and I just got out our second book on securing the cloud. So the article goes on. Dr. Sabari Gupta, president and CEO of Electrosoft, will present who is responsible for the security of cloud-based information systems at the 2019 Government's Risk and Control Conference, jointly presented by the ISACA and the Institute of Internal Auditors, August 12th through 14th, 2019 in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. So while a big lure of the cloud has been the option that you can shove some of your security load off onto the cloud vendor, what many fail to realize is that you can't walk away from security and auditing completely. Take a look at this slide from Dr. Gupta's presentation. If we could scroll down just a little bit to the diagram. It kind of goes and shows that for different types of cloud entities, whether it's SaaS, whether it's full-on bare metal, you name it, different layers of a stack, of the cloud stack, shifts the responsibility either to the cloud vendor or back onto the company. Now, one of the things that Curt and I wrote in our book is the realistic view of the world is that you need to work out where the boundaries are with your provider. And our suggestion in the book was to make sure the terms are spelled out in your service level agreement. Whether it's negotiated or boilerplate, we've maintained that the SLA is truly where the rubber meets the road for all forms of cloud services.
So how do companies provide community watch data or neighborhood watch data in their services and applications, you might ask? Well, there seems to be a couple of sources of data, one being crowdsourced information, of course, and of course the other being authorities or police data feeds. Well, it looks like Amazon and Ring are trying to use both data sources. Now, the California-based company is seeking police departments' permission to tap into the computer-aided dispatch, or CAD feeds, used to automate and improve decisions made by emergency dispatch personnel and actually cut down on police response times. Now, Ring has requested access to the data stream so it can curate, quote, crime news posts for its, quote, neighborhood watch app, Neighbors. Now, Neighbors is an app through which users can share suspicions about alleged criminal activity in their neighborhoods. They can also post video captured by their Ring doorbell cameras, if they have one. And using Neighbors, they can also, they actually require a Ring device. And an internal police email dated back in April 2019 stated that more than 225 police departments have entered into the partnership with Ring. Now, doing so grants the department access to Neighbors' quote-unquote law enforcement portal, through which police can request access to videos captured by Ring doorbell cameras. Now, Ring says it does not provide the personal information of its customers to authorities without consent, of course. Now, one of Ring's main selling points to the police is that Neighbors can be used for community building. Through its police partnerships, Ring has requested access to CAD, which actually includes information provided voluntarily by 911 callers, among other types of data automatically collected. Now, CAD data is typically comprised of details such as names, phone numbers, addresses, medical conditions, and potentially different types of personally identifiable information, including GPS coordinates, and other Ring material. Now, according to Ring material, the direct address or longitude and latitude of the 911 callers is among the information the Neighbors app requires police to provide, along with the time of the incident and the category and description of the alleged crime as well. Now, this information goes back to our constant discussion of whether trusting a company like Amazon with confidential data like 911 calling information is warranted in order to evolve technology and services in order to assist people in the future. Well, folks, that does it for the Blips. Next up, we have the Bites. But before we do, we have to thank a really great sponsor of This Week in Enterprise Tech, and that's Wasabi Hot Cloud Storage. Now, I've used Wasabi in the past, and they are awesome. Now, you might be thinking, I already use cloud storage, right? And the more I store in it, the more I access the data, the more operations I perform on it, the more I get charged. It just keeps growing and growing. And in this day and age, that is the normal story for most cloud providers. Now, most cloud storage providers, they compete by seeing how low they can go in their storage fees and ingress and egress fees. Well, Wasabi really has a solution here. Now, from experience, I can tell you, if you try to go cheaper on cloud storage systems, you really kind of give up on performance and reliability. Well, Wasabi Hot Cloud Storage has a way to fix all of these things. Now, if you're doing small projects all the way up to enterprise projects, Wasabi seems to have figured it all out. Now, listen to this cost. $0.0059 per gigabyte per month. That's $5.99 per terabyte per month. Plus, listen to this. Unlimited free egress for your data. No charge for any API calls. They don't actually pay to actually access your data. Now, check out what you're paying already on cloud storage, because I can tell you, by not including egress fees and API calls and those CRUD operations, it will substantially save you money and cost of doing business. Now, you're probably thinking, well, if they're cheaper, they must be slower. They don't have all the bells and whistles, right? Well, Wasabi really has tackled all these areas. Wasabi has developed a disruptive technology. They found ways to pull raw performance out of their storage devices without actually compromising on security or performance. And they have a revolutionary process that lays data on disks sequentially as opposed to blocks. Now, what happens? Well, that means that Wasabi's storage is 80% cheaper and 6 times faster in speed than the industry leaders. Now, is your organization really worried about compliance? Well, Wasabi has your answer here as well. They have HIPAA, FINRA, and CJS compliance as well. And now think about this. If fast, cheap storage really isn't worth much if your data isn't secure, well, Wasabi has an answer. Wasabi offers a unique feature of immutable buckets that cannot be deleted or altered, protecting your valuable data from accidentally being maliciously destroyed or deleted. Now, if you can find another service today that offers something like that. Now think about this. They also have a 90-day rotating integrity check as well. And in fact, they have 11 nines of durability. That is unheard of in today's cloud storage market. Now, are you worried about data migration? Well, Wasabi has an answer here as well. They have the Wasabi Ball Transfer Appliance, and it's powered by Netgear, and it's designed to transfer large data and reduce your costs. Now, data storage is really all that Wasabi does, and they are the experts, and that is their passion. They believe that in a world of rapidly escalating cloud storage needs, that progress depends on cloud storage being more like a utility with fast, affordable storage available in endless supply. They truly understand the needs of enterprises, so they don't have things like egress fees. Calculate savings for yourself and start a free trial of unlimited storage for a month. Go to wasabi.com, click the free trial link, and enter the code enterprise. Join the movement and migrate your data to the cloud with confidence. Go to wasabi.com and make sure to use the offer code enterprise. And we thank Wasabi for their support of This Week in Enterprise Tech. Well, folks, we have a couple good bites for you today. This one being a little bit more consumer-based, but I think it's a good topic to talk about. Now, question is, why are Americans watching fewer and fewer TV channels? Now, a lot of these providers out there today are trying to answer this question. Now, you might think it may be obvious, right, that there's just cord cutters and people are just watching less things, or they're curating their content, or they're paying for what they actually want rather than just getting kind of forced on content. Now, what does this all mean? Well, it means that people are not only going after the targeted content for themselves, but they're also watching fewer channels. Now, according to an analysis of data done from Nielsen's Total Audience Report released a couple days ago by MediaPost, the average TV household tuned in to around 12.7% channels in 2018. This is actually down from 17.3 in 2008. Now, since the average TV household has access to nearly almost 200 channels or more, that means that consumers use only 6% of a provider's content or product that costs them around $1,200 a year to actually pay for. Now, both pay TV providers and media conglomerates, however, have balked at allowing consumers the ability to actually pay for play or curate what they want in an a la carte more basis. And it's a situation like these that actually might have to change for providers to kind of grasp the new people out there. Now, according to there's a Bruce Lightman, who is a president principal analyst from Lightman Research. In an interview, he says that a la carte was one of those things that never took place because it doesn't make sense for companies involved nor for consumers, because all it would mean is fewer channels at the same price that they're already paying. Now, all the studies have shown that channels that people have, the more channels they have, they actually want to watch. Well, it doesn't seem that seems to be happening here. Now, I want to bring this, guys, to you, because I think this is interesting. This is saying that, you know, we always thought cord cutters were doing it because they wanted to get away from these big provider companies. They wanted to be able to curate their own content, find the content they wanted, and only pay for that. But it seems like what this research firm is saying is that's not true. Most people, they don't care. Like, they're going to go and look at what a provider has, and they're just going to choose from what they have there. What do you guys think? Is this changing? Is cord cutters really have the wrong thoughts of why they're actually reasoning to cord cut, or is it something that's actually true? Maybe throw it over to you first, Curt.
Yeah, I think that what we're getting here is going to be a classic lesson in something the economists call price elasticity. And that is, people want more choice when they believe that the greater choice will come with lowered costs. Mm-hmm. You know, I'll admit I'm one of these people. I was watching my cable bill go up over $200 a month and going, why on earth should I be paying for, well, channels that I don't watch? And there are a lot of channels I don't watch. I tend not to watch the pro channels that are shopping. I tend not to watch channels that are designed for parents with their young children to be educated. My young child is 31. That sort of thing doesn't appeal to me. And so what you end up doing, I think, mentally, is taking your monthly bill, dividing it by the number of channels you have, and saying, okay, each channel costs me, $5 a month. And therefore, if I go down to the 20 channels that I really want to watch, well, it should only cost me $100. In fact, what we're finding is that each of those channels, if there's something you really want, are going to cost you somewhere between $10 and $15 a month. And all of a sudden, if you want all of these things, if you want the premium channels, they cost extra. If you want just a block of channels from one provider, let's say if you really like the Discovery Channel and that block of programming, well, that's going to cost you $15 a month. And by the time you're through, you do have greater control over what comes into your house, but it costs you more money. And as people are finding that it's costing them more money, what they are doing is looking for alternatives to those channels. I look at, the son that I mentioned just a moment ago. He has no cable channels. The kind of thing that his mother and I watch on a fairly regular basis, he doesn't watch at all. He likes Hulu. He likes Netflix, and he'll dip into a couple of other things. But I think what we're seeing is that for a variety of reasons, people are falling out of the habit of watching regular network programming on a regular basis. And once people find out that they can live without that, it's a huge change, the sort that we really haven't seen in a couple of generations.
It makes sense. You kind of brought up a couple good points. I think if you think about it, this is kind of a tactic of some of these providers. They know that, hey, I have some really good premium content, and the way to get the less watched content kind of watched even more by more people, let's kind of attach it to kind of the more watched items. And so this way you kind of blanket them together, you sell them together, and then in hopes that they might actually get more viewers out of that. And that in fact means that advertisers might come along and say, hey, you know what, I want to advertise, but I don't want to pay that much, but it would be great if I was attached to more premium content, so people just might flip the channel and catch my advertising on there. And so it's a tactic by these companies where they have attachment to premium content. But there's also another factor here. Chee, I want to throw this over to you in regards to maybe data attachment here and how WISPs are handling this. How is this kind of changing the ecosystem?
Yeah, there's been lots and lots and lots of people talking about this in the wireless internet service provider world. And the reality is I'm sorry to say, but the millennials are really and truly changing the formula. There's actually a bunch of statistics out. I wish I had the sheet with me. But basically, millennials are now one big change. They're not going for single family homes. Two, they're going for smaller places to live. And one of the biggest decision points that we've been hearing from millennials and property owners is that millennials and that age group are basically judging a lot of their buying decisions on property or rentals on broadband. Now, here's an interesting thing. A lot of larger corporations, say like Spectrum, Comcast, and so forth, they have a formula that they're going through. And if, say, a small walk-up has, say, less than, let's say, 40 units, they're not going to bring fiber. Fiber from the curb into a property is a very large cost proposition. And a lot of the larger corporations consider it such a large cost proposition that unless there are 40 or more units in that domicile, they're not going to bring in the expensive stuff. So the wireless internet service providers, especially as legislation goes through Congress, for frequencies, we're starting to see more and more WISPs going into small apartment buildings. I actually just went through a bunch of training on how to do some really interesting multi-drop fiber into small walk-ups. One of the targets I'm looking at is, 2- and 3-story concrete block walk-ups that a lot of the big companies have completely bypassed. And what I'm doing is I'm actually running a 60 gigahertz to the corner of that building and then hitting a injection unit so I can drop single mode fiber into each unit very inexpensively and provide them gig. So tying this back to the story, the reality is a lot of these people are voting with their dollars very, very quickly. They don't even care. In the same conversation, these kids, these millennials, don't even care if there's cable TV. They get it all over the internet. So I think the cord cutting movement ain't done yet. I think it's going to get even more extreme. And I think entertainment companies, because that's what Spectrum considers itself. Spectrum considers itself an entertainment company. Data is just a way of delivering entertainment to them. I think the market is going to change. I think it's going to change radically. And I think data is going to be the big issue. So going to be very, very interesting. And I think this is actually a harbinger of things to come.
Thanks, Cheaper. Now, before we close up on this, but I do want to throw this back to Curt for one last thought in regards to CarRage agreements. Now, CarRage or CSPs, they tend to resell content or provide content to different areas, and they do so maybe having weird agreements with their customers. Is this actually affecting this as well, Curt?
Absolutely. I mean, we hear about CarRage agreements when a big popular network has trouble in contract negotiations with a cable company. We've recently heard it because of a cable company that couldn't reach a CarRage agreement with CBS. So they lost the CBS networks for their customers for a while. The content companies that tend to be able to throw their weight around are companies like Disney and Discovery, companies with popular channels. But what we often see is that these companies that do have multiple channels tell the cable companies that if they want, a very popular channel at a reasonable price, well, then they have to take a less popular channel, usually at a much lower fee, but they have to take it. And they won't break up the two. Why do they do this? Well, it's because these content companies sell advertising across their networks. So one of the things they can do is offer an advertiser an ad spot that runs across all of their networks. And so if a cable company isn't carrying all of those networks, it means that ad is less valuable. There's nothing that a content producer hates more than someone else rendering their ads less valuable, so they play hardball. What this ultimately means is that this is a problem with an awful lot of players and an awful lot of variables to it. You'll see people who say, well, it's all because of the millennials. It's all because of this. It's all because of that. In truth, like most of these issues, it has a bunch of moving parts, and it's not going to be simple to figure out a new stable model until all of those moving parts settle down.
Absolutely. All right, well, let's put that one to bed. I do want to move on to yours because organizations, they're really racing ahead. They want to use containers. They're starting to deploy to them, but they might be going too fast. Is that right, Curt?
Absolutely. And in particular, a new study says that organizations are turning to containers even though they're not really confident in the security of those containers. Now, containers, which, as we know, are virtualized applications rather than virtualized operating systems, are key to DevOps, and they're maturing as critical parts of enterprise application infrastructures. Even though the security strategies for containers are maturing, organizations say that they are still struggling to have security keep up with the other facets of container deployment. Now, this last week, StackRox issued a new report that was based on research by the Aimpoint Group, and it shows that more than a third of companies haven't begun to implement a container security policy yet. While 15% say that their company is in the planning stage with container security strategy, 19% say that they haven't even gotten that far yet. Now, part of the problem, according to StackRock CEO Kamal Shah, is the complexity of the environment into which containers are being deployed. While many people think of containers as solely a cloud technology, Shah says that they found that 70% of people are running containers on premise and 53% are running in hybrid mode. And that means they're running it in a combination of on-premises and in public cloud platforms. Now, the reasons that companies are turning to containers is pretty simple. It's a very fast way to deploy applications, especially it's a fast way to run through the Agile and DevOps methodology of development, get it into production as fast as possible. Still, we are finding that there are an awful lot of holes in container security. Let me give you an example. One of the things that people do to speed up container deployment is get pre-made images off of public repositories, bring them in-house, and deploy them. Saves them a bunch of time in putting those images together. Well, Jerry Gamblin, who is a principal security engineer at Kenna Security, scanned the 1,000 most popular application images and found that over 60% of the top Docker files held a vulnerability with at least a moderate risk score. And over 20% of the files contained at least one vulnerability that would be considered high risk. When looking at the source of the vulnerabilities, the StackRock report says that poor deployment and poor filtering are principal problems. And according to the report, 60% of executives say that the misconfiguration represents the greatest risk. Now, I'm going to turn to my co-host because we've seen misconfiguration as the culprit behind not only container breaches, but cloud breaches. And we're going to address that in a second, but first, and I've got to turn to you, Lou. Are containers really ready for prime time, or is this still a technology that needs to be baked a little more thoroughly?
You know, I think that they are ready. I think that they are just there for organizations they want to be able to scale out their infrastructure. They want to be able to scale out their applications. The concept is there. The technology is there. It's just that we're at this point in the timeline where things require a lot of investment to get configured, to get secured, and to be able to scale well. And I think that that's just the reality of any technology when it comes to services. I think you see that with a lot of things. You first see managed services, then unmanaged services. And I think we're in the stage with containers where organizations, they need to educate themselves with how they're actually deploying these things and how they're securing them before they actually make large decisions to move applications there, because they know that once they do, they can scale it out. They can develop a scale out story when it comes to containers, and they can service them easier and they can deploy easier. But what does that mean from a security perspective and from a setup and configuration perspective? So I definitely think the technology is ready. It's just that there is a lot more providers out there and a lot more services that need to spend more time on kind of combining things together, so it makes it easier for people to be more secure out of the box.
You know, I agree, and I'm going to turn to Brian. Brian, Lou mentioned the idea of the providers making things easier by combining them, putting them together, packaging them up in a way that makes it easier to deploy secure containers. My question to you is that we've seen all these issues with default settings in containers and clouds. Is it time for the providers to revisit what they're doing with their default configurations and go to a security first philosophy of setting up their configurations?
Bottom line, yeah. There's way too many really badly chosen default settings. I want to actually set the Wayback Machine, especially since I'm staring at Mr. Peabody, and say that, you know, I first saw containers appearing as a way for the marketing people to get their product out in front of potential buyers faster and for less costs on supporting it. So let's put this in perspective. There's an awful lot of product out there that the initial configuration, the install process is god-awful complex. And this was a really big problem for marketing and salespeople, because then they would have to allocate a ungodly amount of money in support time just so that someone can set up a free demo. And this just didn't make sense to a lot of these people. Income containers. Oh, we can have a demo system completely set up and ready to go. All they have to do is run the container and they can demo our system. And now all of a sudden our liability for demo systems goes way down. Great, let's do it. Well, here's the problem. Now that we're starting to use containers for production systems, I think we still have the stigma left over from those demo systems where we're trying to set it up so that one size fits all. And I think that's going to be my watchword for this whole concept. One size does not fit all. And too many people that are playing with containers take it right off the shelf, install it, and expect to not have to do any tweaking. That, I think, is a big mistake. And I think we need to slow down. We need to make sure that we actually swing the pendulum back and say, hey, once we get that container installed, there must be follow-up. And I don't think that's happening in enough cases. So the reality I'd like to say is, yeah, default configurations too often are badly chosen. Going for let's get it up and running so that you can start paying us money faster is a very dangerous attitude. Just the fact that, a Node-RED container that I was playing with came with no HTTPS turned on and no logins turned on. So I had to go and tinker to turn both those on. In reality, both should have been on by default.
Well, Lou, Brian makes a bunch of good points, and I want to turn to you sort of for the last word. What is it about containers, a technology that was designed to be pretty darn simple, that's so hard? I mean, we see companies missing on the same points over and over and over. Is the issue with the technology or just with the way that companies are addressing deploying on containers?
Yeah, I mean, this is the constant battle that organizations like Docker and Kubernetes are handling. Is they're saying, hey, how do we actually host and deploy these things, and how do we make it easy for apps to be hosted on them, and so on and so forth. And so they're constantly trying to figure out how to make things easier. And I think that like you said, the concept is fairly simple, right? But usually the execution with the technology, even though it's simple, is not easy. And I think that comes where containers is. I mean, the container concept might be easy, but there's a lot of technology and layers that go along with it. And then there's also the CI/CD portion of it is, once I have an application that I've potentially built more cloud native, more container native, now how do I get to make sure that it's constantly deploying, constantly integrating, and it's doing that, and it's scaling, and it's load balancing, and it's doing all these things. And if you configure it just minutely wrong, you can run into potential security issues or even just reliability issues. And I think that's where we're running into, is just that's where the technology is right now. And it's something that, either a startup or these organizations like Docker Swarm, Kubernetes will figure out as things go along, as more and more people use them. But I think it's just the current state of affairs.
Well, we know that it's going to remain complex for a while because containers aren't going anywhere. They're just too darn useful. We look forward to continuing to cover this and hopefully cover it from a perspective of something other than, darn it, we still don't know how to deploy them securely. Well, that does it for our bites. We've got a great guest coming up and a great host to take us to him. So, Lou, we're going to turn it back over to you. I suspect we've got more advertising goodness to come and definitely a great guest.
Thanks, Curt. Well, before we get to my favorite part of the show, where we get to bring in a guest to drop some knowledge on the Twilight Riot, we have to thank a great sponsor of This Week in Enterprise Tech, and that is NetScout. Now, I bet you thought about accelerating innovation and your operational agility for your organization, right? Well, as the pace of change continues to exponentially increase, so does the risk of failure, and this raising the stakes for CIOs, architects, and even your IT operations. Now, simply put, digital transformations have really changed the game. But NetScout has a different perspective here, one that was built for the era of digital and data center transformation. It actually is called Visibility Without Borders. Now, the real-time visibility extends to wherever your technology infrastructure and your business applications reside. Now, as the world leader in transforming packet data, NetScout's smart data delivers high resolution and continuous monitoring across any network, data center, cloud, even 5G, and more. Now, it's already in use monitoring and securing some of the world's most critical commercial and public service infrastructures. NetScout's next generation level of visibility provides the holistic perspective that IT teams are really seeking. See more at netscout.com. That is netscout.com. And we thank NetScout for their support of This Week in Enterprise Tech. Well, folks, it brings us to that time of the show where we get to bring in a guest to drop some knowledge on the Twilight Riot. And today we have Vijay Kurkal, Chief Operating Officer at Resolve Systems. Vijay, thank you so much for being here. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Lou. Very excited to be part of the show.
Now, before we jump into that meaty topic of IT automation, Vijay, our audience really loves to hear origin stories. That is people's journeys through the tech industry. Maybe you can take us through your journey in your career and how you ended up at Resolve.
Perfect. Yeah. So I've spent close to 20 years in the enterprise technology space, and I've been fortunate to see the enterprise technology space from a few different lenses. So I've spent over 7 years at Bain & Company. And so I looked as a leader in their technology practice. So I worked very, very closely with large Fortune 500 companies, helping them through digital transformation, as well as large technology companies. And second lens is, I've actually been an operator and worked with large technology companies such as IBM, VMware. And finally, the last chapter of my journey, much more exciting, closer to the startup world. So I spent over 2 years with Insight Venture Partners, which is a venture capital firm, and spent a lot of time looking at tons of enterprise technology companies that are in the startup phase to see the innovation that's happening, and the changes that are happening is fascinating and exciting, right? And one of the investments Insight Venture Partners made was in the IT automation space, and that brings me to Resolve. So Insight saw a great opportunity with Resolve Systems and invested over $100 million to really accelerate Resolve's journey in the IT automation space, build out the products, and support companies in that automation journey. So today, I'm the Chief Operating Officer. So I've been there for over a year now. And personally, it's a very, very exciting role because on a daily basis, I get to go out, talk to technology executives in Global 2000 organizations and talk about automation. It's a subject I'm passionate about, and it's very exciting.
Absolutely. Now, automation really is a huge topic, right? With organizations, they talk about DevOps, they talk about hybrid clouds, reducing their SLOs and their SLAs, and there's always room for that consistency and reliability when using automation. But what do you think are the main drivers for the automation trend that we're seeing?
Yeah, and I think, you started framing it perfectly, Lou, right? So I think one of the biggest drivers for automation is around agility of IT operations, right? With the whole DevOps movement and with more and more pressures from line of business, I think the pressure is very, very clear for IT operations, which is to be much more agile, be much more responsive to the business, be it being responsive to any kind of outages or incidents, but also it could be just in terms of service requests, right? Any requests or needs from the line of business or DevOps, the expectation is that the service levels are much more tighter. But now all of this has to be done under cost pressures as well, right? So it's no longer feasible. I mean, if you look at the cost breakdown of any IT organization, still 65% or more is on personnel costs, right? So still IT, as much as with all the tools and gadgets most IT organizations have, it's still incredibly manual today in terms of all the work that needs to be done. And so the reality is, look, as the complexity goes up, the number of apps goes up, the answer is not about throwing more bodies on there. So there is real cost pressures for the business as well. And so to manage the agility and in a cost-effective manner, the only answer to really break that conundrum, it would be automation going down the road.
That makes sense. Now, see a lot of organizations out there. They're saying, okay, we don't have anything automated right now. We're paying a lot of people to actually do the work. We're actually monitoring things ourselves, so on and so forth.
Yep.
Where do you see the low-hanging fruit? Where do organizations usually start? Where are you seeing that critical mass in automation?
Yeah, absolutely. So look, there's a couple of areas where we see, a great place to start out from automation. So one is just the service desk, right? Because service desk is a great integrating framework and integrating force around all the noise that's coming down, right? Be it an incident or be it a service request or a change request. It's usually your service desk that it all comes down there, and then it cascades out to L1, L2, L3, depending on the type of issues and problems, right? And so we see a huge amount of innovation opportunity right around there, because there are a variety of tickets or again, thank you for bringing that up, right? Be it restoring a VPN connectivity from an incident point of view, or from a service request, just starting to provision a server, or starting to provision certain services, or patch management from a change management request, right? So these are all pretty meaty work that is incredibly manual today as you start to dive into the detailed process. And those are all great low-hanging fruits to start off on the automation journey. But one important concept before I throw it back to you, Lou, is I like the way you framed it, is automation is a journey, right? It is not a flip of the switch where you say, look, overnight you're going to get everything automated. That's not realistic. So it is a journey, and starting with low-hanging fruit is a fantastic approach.
Yeah, I think that is interesting, because I was looking through the Resolve web pages, and I noticed even on the infrastructure, networking infrastructure part of the page, there were some interesting facts there, and there's things that you can't really ignore here, right? It says that a couple facts here is $1 million saved every year by using automation, Windows, and Unix servers. 90% you're gaining efficiency sometimes from 45 to 5 minutes by just automating service restarts. And right. So you have a lot of facts here that you just can't really ignore from automation. Is it because the fact that, is it just the IT workforce really hard to scale and people are just not getting the personnel that are maybe educated in doing these things themselves? Or is it the fact that automation can just really just help scale your business in general?
Yeah, so both are great points, Lou, right? So one, firstly, automation just helps you scale the business, right? Because most IT organizations are thinking about, okay, what is their budget going to look like next year and the following year and so on, right? And so they've realized that, look, as the number of tickets, the number of incidents, number of service requests are, growing at 50, 100% for some of the faster growing organizations, they've realized that, look, doubling service desk or doubling your IT ops team is not the answer. So they are aggressively looking at automation as an answer, right? So that's one. But the second one, I think you raised another very, very important topic around skills shortage, right? And I think the nuance there, Lou, is the IT is trying to balance two things, right? IT, on one hand, is trying to build the future for any business that they're supporting, right? Because it's exciting time for IT, because technology can truly transform, be it banking or media or healthcare, right? So the CIO increasingly has a table in the C-suite discussion to drive and transform the business. But unfortunately, the reality is the CIO of today, still 85% of their budget is kind of dedicated to maintain existing systems, existing services, right? And so the question is around how do you shift that budget both from headcount and type of mind share, dollars, everything towards building the future as opposed to maintaining and keeping the lights on what you have today. And so that's where the nuance around skill shortage comes in, because there is a shortage in terms of amount of people dedicated to building the future in most enterprise organizations.
Now, I do want to bring my co-host in because they're kind of shaking with excitement here because automation is a big topic and it's big in the enterprise world, and both of them have seen the trends here. Curt, I want to throw this over to you first because there's a lot of uses for automation here, right?
Well, there are certainly a lot of uses, and my real question is this, and it gets to sort of one of the foundational things. When I'm listening to the language that you're using, half of me expects people to start marching around the perimeter of the room, waving agile banners or singing the praises of DevOps. With what you're doing in terms of automation, do you find your customers are only using this automation in the context of agile or even more of in DevOps, or is it a broader application field than that?
No, it is much broader, Curt. A great question again, right? So for us, there is a view of DevOps, and DevOps, there's a whole bunch of team and people trying to build IT, right? So they're building new applications, deploying it, etc. For me, the view of IT operations is where, IT operations, to be honest, is a pretty tough job, right? Because they are maintaining and holding all of those things that are built in a very effective manner, making sure nothing breaks. And if anything breaks, they need to bring it back up really quickly, and all of this in a cost-effective manner. And so for me, the IT ops is absolutely struggling to figure out how to use automation to really help them in their approach to support the line of business and the DevOps teams that are coming down pretty hard on them.
Well, when we're talking about the teams, I know that there are a lot of CFOs who hear the word automation and their head starts filling with glorious visions of lowered employee count. Is that what you're seeing people do? Use automation in lieu of additional human resources? Or is the automation something that's allowing existing teams of any size to do things they couldn't do otherwise? Where is automation coming down on that particular scale?
Yeah, it is absolutely the second point, right? Because I think if you go into any CIOs, we talk about the conversations and we ask them, my first question I ask them is around, what are the priorities do you have, right? And they have a laundry list of priorities, and most of their teams are struggling to even scratch through the surface of even getting into top 4 or 5, right? And most organizations have a list of 10 or 15 different initiatives, and these are pretty major initiatives and transformational stuff ideally they want to get through. And so the reality is, the people are buried with a ton of tedious, manual, several repetitive stuff. Ideally, if you take those things off their plate, they can start to go into some of these really critical initiatives that keep getting postponed year after year. And so that's exactly, how automation is viewed and approached. We rarely see, where automation comes in and immediately they say, okay, we're going to let go of 100 people like that. Look, it could happen in certain rare cases. Again, obviously, automation does help you do that. But most organizations just have so many more things to do that the first thing they would do is to say, okay, great, how do I redeploy these resources into other critical initiatives that's been on the back burner for me?
So, Brian, I wanted to throw this over to you because I think you obviously are experienced in network infrastructure and deployment and security. Where are you seeing automation actually helpful?
Actually, I got hit over the head when I first started laying out ground plans with my partners on how to bring up a wireless internet service provider. And I was thinking, wow, how am I going to be able to have just a couple of us service what hopefully will be hundreds or maybe even thousands of customers? And the reality is it's got to be automation. I see automation in the small, wireless internet service providers, the mom and pops operations. And that automation is the only way that I can see small operations being able to compete with the big guys. But what I'm kind of curious about is automation's got a lot of people in the market. What I haven't been hearing is whether or not automation systems are going to start using some of the new AI toolkits that are coming out. Is Resolve got that on their roadmap?
Yeah, absolutely. And so for me, automation without AI, is definitely not going to work. And AI is going to be an incredible piece of how automations are deployed. So the way I think about it is, automation, think about that as, there are several automation bots that will go in and do a specific task much faster than manually done, right? But the question would be, which bot do you actually activate and deploy, right? And so that's where the intelligence starts to come in, Brian, right? Because anytime you have an incident or a problem, there is a diagnostic that runs in, and that's going to be a whole bunch of information that's collected. But then there is this intelligence engine, which is going to continue and resolve. It is an incredible part of our both organic and an M&A strategy for us to continue to enhance our AI capabilities. And for us, it's around these automations are going to start to get deployed based on the intelligence around context and knowing which one maximizes your odds of resolving that particular issue, right? Is it really just because you have a memory shortage, do you immediately go in and deploy memory? Or do you feel like, wait, there is another application running on that server that's not critical, why don't we shut that down, right? So, and that's where the nuance and intelligence comes in. And that's where the machine learning which will learn from your particular environment and seeing, have we seen these type of incidents in the past? And therefore, how best do we need to go in and resolve? And those are the type of things come in. And then, what you have over here is also the human interaction, because part of the intelligence is also, we don't want to necessarily leave out humans from it, right? The question is around how do you bring in the human judgment in the right time to augment the automation out there? And this is another very unique approach for Resolve.
Well, speaking of humans, how does Resolve address the issue of the so-called tribal knowledge factor?
This is a great question, Brian, because almost every single organization we go into, there's always these subject matter experts. If there's a particular issue, you need to go to this one particular person because he knows everything related to that, right? And for me, one of the exciting things about the automation journey is step one, you can never automate anything that's not codified or actually put in paper, right? And so the most exciting thing or the biggest value that organizations get through the automation journey is really step one around thinking through, okay, what is the actual process? What is the best practices of the process? Let's go pick the brains of the subject matter experts and start to codify it, right? And therefore, one of the biggest features for our automation engine is around a very simple way to start taking all this tribal knowledge and start to putting that down into our system. And so it is a lot of drag and drop. It's very easy way in which you don't need to know code or you don't need to be an expert in our system. It's very easy for all of these subject matter experts to start to put all of those processes down, and then you can start to build automations again without developers, as you can see on the screen here, to go build out these automations. And again, the other nuance point I'm trying to say is that there are lots of task-based automation, right? So we are going beyond saying that, it is not about automating one task. The real step change in the value of automation is going to come in when you automate an entire end-to-end process, right? And that's what is value to, that's the service that IT is providing to the line of business. And that's what the line of business or any customers of IT really care about is how fast do you do this entire end-to-end process? And that's what we help accelerate in our customer environments.
So Vijay, you kind of touched on it a little bit. We showed some of those pages, and we talked a little about kind of a general sense of automation, and you just kind of touched on, workflows, things that constantly people are doing. Now, maybe let's get into a little bit about like what Resolve is doing in general, and how you're targeting particular IT organizations. Are you curating a set of workflows, end-to-end workflows that you then kind of provide to organizations where they can just kind of use them? Are you helping them build those workflows? I think you mentioned the drag and drop capability. What are you actually providing? How are you helping organizations?
Yeah, that's a great question, right? So, since a lot of customers, when we go and talk to, are starting from a very, very low maturity in an automation point of view. So most people are in very early stages of their automation journey. So inevitably, there is a ton of inertia around automation, right? Most people are in a little bit of paralysis around, how do I even get started? This feels so daunting. What do I do? And so for us, it is incredibly important because we've been in the market for about 6 to 8 years, and we've worked with several Fortune 500 companies in that time. So we have seen some common themes or common issues which give you a quick ROI around automation. So we come in with out-of-the-box automation to get you started to realize your quick ROI, right? So the first thing for us is, each IT ecosystem is very different. There's tons of monitoring tools. You have your ITSM platform and a whole bunch of other infrastructure systems that this automation engine needs to connect to. So step one for us, we come in with pre-built integrations where Resolve very seamlessly goes in and fits into your complex ecosystem. That's step one. And step two is we come in with pre-built automation templates, several of which you see here, where we tell our customers, look, these automation templates or automation bots are already built. It gets you 80% there for your process. Now let's go in and do the final tweaks or customization that's required to deploy those bots into your environment, right? And so that's how we accelerate it. But then now, as they go into the second phase of their automation journey, that's when now they would say that, okay, now I feel my confidence level is greater around automation. I now start to see the ROI that the automation is giving me. Now I'm ready to go in and automate some of more complex processes that are not out of the box, right? That are very unique to, be it a telecom customer or be it a financial services customer. There are some unique processes that they're going through. And this is where the drag and drop and automation builders help accelerate and codify whatever is their process, their unique knowledge into our automation platform or the engine. Does that help answer the question, Lou?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's great. I think one thing that maybe we could help organizations understand too is, are you really just made for the on-prem, or is there also support for cloud services as well, or maybe even the hybrid approach?
Absolutely. It's, again, a great question, right? Invariably, every single customer we go to is a hybrid customer, right? There's a lot of workloads that are absolutely moving to the cloud, but at the same time, there's tons of critical workloads, that are still, on-prem or colo, et cetera. So the reality is it's a very, very complex environment, and we absolutely integrate with, AWS, Azure, VMware, and a whole host of other on-prem environments. And in fact, the maintenance of this level of complex environment is what makes the job of IT operations incredibly difficult today, right? And that's what we want to go in and simplify using automation.
Fantastic. Vijay, thank you so much for being here. Now we're running a little low on time, but we did want to give you a chance to tell a little bit about Resolve. Where can the organizations go to get started? How can they, who do they contact? What's the best approach?
Yep, perfect. And look, anyone can, Lou, thank you for sharing some of the screenshots from our website. Our website is resolve.io. And it's a great resource to go in and take a look at, what Resolve can do. In the last few minutes, what I would summarize is this. which is, look, automation has been spoken about for a long time in IT environment and in organizations. IT environments are not new to automation, right? So over a decade, there's a lot of scripting tools or point automation tools different teams have deployed already, right? In almost every single environment we go into, there's already about 6 to 8 different point tools that are deployed. But I asked them, most organizations, one simple question around, great, how much productivity and enhancement have you realized from automation? How much cost have you been able to strip out of your business, right? And the reality is people have not been thoughtful or organized or systematic in terms of how they viewed automation. So I think where the trend we are seeing is some of the more sophisticated organizations are moving towards building automation centers of excellence because they are realizing that, look, we don't want point automations run by, deployed by our storage team or by our cloud team or by our service desk. Actually, the requirement is around an integrated platform that cuts across your compute environment, be it server storage, your network environment, your security, and your service desk, to stitch together some of your complex processes that invariably cut across these silos, right? And that's what you need to automate, and that's what's going to give you a true step change in terms of value that automation can bring to your business, right? And that's what automation centers of excellence that a lot of some of the more mature customers are building out, and we are helping partner with some of the thought leadership around that. And more importantly, they're building those center of excellence on top of the Resolve automation engine or the automation platform.
Thank you so much. Well, folks, you've done it again. You've sat through another hour of the Best Dang Enterprise podcast in the universe, according to 9 out of 10 automation batch scripts. But I do want to make sure I thank everyone who makes this show possible, especially my co-host in crime, starting with our favorite security journalist, Mr. Curtis Franklin. Curtis, where can the folks find you, all of your work, and where you're going next?
Well, my work they can always find over at darkreading.com. And as for me, starting Monday, they can find me in the desert. I'll be out in Las Vegas all next week, dodging grasshoppers and trying to learn all I can about security. I have some great interviews lined up. I think there are some outstanding articles that are going to come out of it, and might even be, there are rumors that sometime in the next couple of weeks might even be an appearance on another show in the Twit network. So there's going to be a lot of exciting things happening out there. Follow me on Twitter. I'll be tweeting like a madman while I'm out there, so you can keep up with what I'm doing and can ask me questions of anything you see. I'll look forward to that and look forward to seeing you from the desert.
Well, speaking of madmen, we have to thank our very own Geek in Paradise and our co-host in crime, Mr. Brian Chee. Cheebert, where can the folks find you, all of your work, and how to pitch you some ideas?
Well, on Twitter, I am ADVNETLAB, Advanced Network Laboratory. Anyway, I am also Cheebert at twit.tv, or better yet, use Twiet at twit.tv, and that way it'll hit all the hosts. And we can go and listen to your great suggestions for guests and topics. Anyway, life is good, and I am hoping to see more folks as things go on. Anyway, I do want to say that the Twit AI, aka Victor, was really great on the not screenshots, the website scrolls today. That was really special. Thank you very much, Victor.
Absolutely. Thank you, Victor, so much. Before we thank Victor, though, we also have to thank you, because you're the person that drops in each and every week to watch and to listen to our show and to get your enterprise goodness. And we want to make it easy for you to watch and listen and catch up on your enterprise goodness. The way you can do that, go out right now to our show page, twit.tv/Twiet. There you can get all the amazing back episodes, the show notes, the co-host information, guest information, plus links to all the stories we do during the show. But more importantly, next to those videos, you get those helpful download and subscribe links. You can help support the show by getting your audio version, your video version, and your HD video version of your choice. You can listen on any one of your devices. It really is the best way to stay on top of your IT and enterprise news. Now, after you subscribe, share the show with your friends, family, coworkers, because they definitely will want to watch the show. It keeps them on top of the news. And it's great content. They're going to want to watch. I'm telling you right now, people next to me here in my office, they come to me and say, hey, what show are you just doing? And I share it with them. And you know what? Every week we talk about the content. So they definitely find it valuable for their week. Now, after you subscribe, remember we do also the show live each and every week, 1:30 p.m. Pacific on Fridays. Go check it out at live.twit.tv. And there you can come see how the show is run, because we do show the back behind the scenes as well. And of course, if you're going to watch the show live, you might as well jump into the fantastic group of people in our chat room, irc.twit.tv. There you can chat with everybody who's listening to them, watching the show live, and also offer some show content, maybe some questions, maybe some additional topics to talk about. We really have a great group of people in there, so please join us there as well. Now, don't forget, we can also follow me on twitter.com/LouMM. There you can see all the things I post about my projects I'm doing at home, projects I'm doing at work. Also, you can see what I do at Microsoft by just checking out dev.office.com, where we actually post the latest and greatest ways to customize Office and your experience and make it more productive for you and your organization. Also, I want to thank everyone who makes this show possible, especially to Leo and Lisa, who continues to support This Week in Enterprise Tech each and every week. We couldn't do the show without them. Thank you so much for their support. And also thank you to the engineers at Twit. And of course, thank you to our tireless producer, Mr. Brian Chee. He does all the bookings, the plannings for the show, and we constantly keep him busy. So we thank you so much for doing all the work. Of course, before we sign out, we do have to thank our TD for today, our Twit AI behind the scenes there. Victor, thank you so much for all your hard work. But tradition goes, what was today's show topic?
Well, I know it has something to do with automation, but I think there might be a way to save TV if we can somehow automate TV watching to get people to watch more TV.
Maybe. But I would say you were really close. It was about automation, but it's more about the age of automation. But you're very, very close. Maybe next time, Victor. Thank you so much.
Maybe automating TV can bring a bigger age of automation.
Hey, maybe that's the next generation of ClickBot.
Make you watch channels. Fantastic. Thanks,
channel
guys.
Changer.
Yeah. Thanks, guys. All right. Well, until next time, I'm Louis Maresca, just reminding you, if you want to know what's going on in the enterprise, just keep quiet.